Hi there, I'm Paul, and thank you for watching another of my PowerApps videos. So this video is actually part 6 in my series of messing around with cognitive services and PowerApps. In part 1, I went through and showed you a bunch of different little scenarios, little mini apps if you like, highlighting some of the things that we could do with PowerApps and Cognitive Services. And we're now on to the one where we're experimenting with the Face API, which can do things like guess the gender and the age of the person, and also now give you some information about the emotions that they are displaying. So that's a little bit of an enhancement over what I showed you a few weeks back in that part 1 video. So this is the app on the screen now. So let's have a little demo of how that works. And then what we're going to do is we're going to build this complete app from scratch, signing up for any services that we need, everything else that we need to do. And the whole thing is probably going to take us around about 40 minutes if I don't waffle too much. Okay, so here we are on with the demo. So I am going to try and show some happiness for this picture. There we are. So I've taken the picture. I'm going to hit the Analyse button. So now what's happening in the background is the picture is being sent via Flow to the Face API. The information is coming back through Flow to PowerApps, and then we're displaying it on the screen. We're putting a rectangle around where the face was found. And we are giving a readout for the gender, for the age, the smile, and then various emotions, and at the bottom there, baldness, unfortunately, and also we've got hair color. Okay, so let's try and show a different emotion now. So I'm going to click this button to throw that image away, and here we go. Let's see if we can get a little bit of anger going on. And there we go. I got a score of nearly 78% on anger for that one. So you get the idea. If there are multiple people in the picture, then you get a rectangle around each person, each face in the picture, and you just have to click within that rectangle, and then you get the details for that person down here at the bottom of the screen. So let's go ahead and have a go at putting that together. So I'm now going to jump into, here we are, a blank PowerApp. The only thing in there is the Datacom logo to remind you that I am coming to you from Datacom in Christchurch, New Zealand. Okay, so let's start putting this together real quick, because if you've been through the earlier ones, this will make sense to you already. So I'm just going to add an image control. A camera control. I'm using this camera control, not add picture. It's a little bit easier to deal with the images that come from the camera control. Plus, the camera control will give you an image size which is less than 4 megabytes. So even if you're running this on a high-end smartphone with a much more high-resolution camera, when you use the camera control, the resolution of the image is limited, and that's good because when we want to work with cognitive services, we've got to keep our image sizes to 4 megabytes or below. So by using this control, then we'll be sure that we're not sending an image which is too big, too complex to be processed. Okay, so there we've got our camera. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to add an image control as well. Just pop that to the side. And what I want to happen is when I click on the camera to store the photo and display the photo in this image control. So first of all, let's show you how we can store the photo. We're going to go to the onSelect property for the camera. So this is the one that fires whenever we click or we tap on the camera. And we are going to use the function, clear collect. And what we're going to do is we are going to create a collection called col photo, and we're going to populate that collection with the image data from the camera. And we can do that by saying camera, it's camera 2, this control, dot photo. There we go. So now when I click on here, what should happen is the collection gets populated. So remember, we can go to our view menu, collections, we can see our collection, and we can see what's in there. So a collection is always a tabular structure. It can have multiple columns and multiple rows. Now, the way we're going to be working with this is we're only going to have one row in there because we're going to clear out the photo each time we take a new one. And we're only going to have one column in there. And that column is the URL column. So the image data, when we collect from the camera control, the image data comes through as something called a URI data format. So that's important because later on we're going to need to convert it to a binary format in Flow. But don't worry, that's very straightforward to do. You may have seen it in the earlier videos, but I'll talk you through it again now. So time to make this image show the photo that we have just collected. So we can go get that from the collection. So our collection was called col photo. Now, of course, I can't just say col photo here because col photo, remember, is a table of information. I've got to specify that I want this from the first row of the table, and I've also got to specify a column as well. So I'm saying give me the first row, and then dot URL is going to give me the column called URL. So now here we can see we've got the image of the photo that we have taken. What I'm just going to do quickly now is I am going to place this image over the top of the camera control. So the way I'm going to do that is, rather than by trying to line it up manually, I'm going to do it by using the X, Y, height and width controls. So let's do that. So I'm going to come down here to X, and I'm going to say I want the X of this to be camera 2.x. Let's just highlight that to make the next steps a little quicker. So I'm going to go Y, and I'm going to paste in what I just copied and say Y, and we're going to do the same width, paste and width, and with the height, you guessed it, we're going to paste it and put height in there as well. So why have I done it that way? I could have just placed it manually over the top, but then if I ever want to come back and make changes to my form, if I want to move the camera control around, I would have to move the camera control and then move the image control as well. If I want to resize the camera control, I can now do it, and the image control is automatically being resized as well at the same time. So I think it's a very good idea to try to get in the habit of using XY coordinates and making things relative to one another. Right, next step then. So selecting the camera control again in the onSelect property. What I want is, when I've taken a photo, for the image to show, but when I'm in the camera mode, for the image to be hidden. So let's just sort that out now. So I am going to create a context variable called con for context show photo, and we will set that to the value true when we click on the camera and we take a photo. And then I'm going to go to the image control, and I am going to set its visible property to that variable. So that's all good. And what we're going to want to do as well is we're going to want to pop in here a little trash can for throwing the picture away, and the onSelect of that is going to be set to update context con show photo, and we're going to set that to false. Okay, so all sort of basic stuff at the moment. So we can click and take a picture. There we are, and we can click on the trash can to throw the picture away and get back to normal. So that's all good stuff. Just one other little thing we will point out on here. This is my image control for the photo that we have taken. So let me make that clear. I'll call this image photo. There we go. And the order in which you see the items here on the left-hand side is their Z order. Okay, so the Z order is the sort of third dimension. So right now, icon is at the top of this list. So this is my trash can icon. So if I move my trash can icon over here, I can see it over the top of camera. Okay, what I could do is I could set this. There we are. I could reorder it and I can send it to the back, or I can send it just one control backwards and forwards. But right now we'll send it right to the back. And so now you can see it is covered over. So it doesn't really matter too much what the Z is of that trash can, but I do need to make sure that my image photo is above my camera. Otherwise, even when I set the image photo visible to true, I won't see it because the camera will be over the top of it. So just a little tip there. That's what this ordering is all about here. Now then, on to the next step. We're going to put in a button to do our analysis. So here we are. So let's call this button Analysis. And what we're going to do is when we hit this button, we are going to trigger a flow to run. You can't really use the Face API from directly within PowerApps. The connector doesn't have the necessary options exposed at the moment. A little bit more about that later perhaps, but we're going to do it the flow way again, as we have done in most of the other videos. There's a few connectors and a few functions that do work directly within PowerApps, but majority of the time, for now at least, we're having to use flow. So I'm going to say, when I click this button, what I want is I want a flow to run. So that's giving me the flows that I've already created. So there you can see I've been playing around with different things, but I'm going to create a new flow now. So here we are, I'm in flow and I've got my PowerApps trigger already in there. So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to make PowerApps accept a parameter which is going to be the image data that we want to analyze. Now in Flow you can't just go into this trigger and say, hey, ask for some image data. It's a little bit more of a workaround than that. So let's show you how we're going to achieve that. What we're going to do is we're going to select any action which is going to have as one of its parameters file data. So SharePoint create file is a good one for that. We could use OneDrive for business or Azure file storage, doesn't really matter. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the box in. Hello, any values? No, okay, so I'm going to have to enter a custom value, and let me just go grab the URL of the site, pop that in there. Okay, and now that I've got the site in there, it will let me navigate through the libraries on the site, and I can specify a file name. There we go. And now finally I get down to this file content box. So this is where I want it to be. The whole aim here is to make this flow ask PowerApps for file content. And the way that we do that is by getting one of the parameters of the right type on the screen and pressing the Ask in PowerApps button. I'm just going to do one more thing here, is I'm going to rename this action to image, and I'll explain that now. Because when I hit this Ask in PowerApps, what's going to happen is the trigger is going to know that it needs to ask PowerApps to fill in some data, and the name it's going to give that parameter is going to be based on this name here of the action and of the step, the parameter within the action. So let's hit the Ask in PowerApps. So there we are. So I've now created a parameter called image file content. Right, now I never really want to save this image in SharePoint. It's not necessary. Okay, I'm just doing this step so that I can get hold of the image data. Perhaps I don't mind there being a test1 JPEG, which is continually being overwritten as we're taking images. But if I don't need it, it's very easy just to put this into a condition that will never fire. So I can say add a condition where 1 is equal to 1, which is never going to happen. So if 1 is not equal to 1, perform this action. So it's never going to perform this action. Even though it's never going to perform the action, the fact that I have put this parameter in is still going to make PowerApps request the image file data when we try and run that flow. Okay, so now I can put a new step. So remember, this data comes to us in this DataUri format. So we need to turn it into good old-fashioned binary before we can do any other work with it. So let's do that step as well. So I'm going to use a data operations compose step. And in this step, I'm going to go into expressions. So this is getting a little more complicated, but all we need to do is say, I want to convert DataUri to binary. Put in the bracket there. And then what we can do is we can use our dynamic content, and we can scroll through the list of all of the bits of information that our flow has come up with so far and say, look, just use the image file content. So that's now filled in up here. Don't forget to click the OK button. That's what will actually populate it into the compose action in your flow. Great, we're moving along at a great pace now. So we're at a situation where we're going to be able to have a button in PowerApps where we pass through the image data. The image data is then going to get turned to binary data, and then we're going to want to get that sent to the Face API. Now there is a Face API connector, as we can see here, and the method of it that we're going to use is the detect faces. But there's a big but with this. This does not expose all of the features of the Face API that we would want to use. So I guess what happens here is new features or new APIs are created, then someone on the flow team wraps up those features into one of these friendly actions that you've got in flow, and lets you put in the information that you need in a much more simple format than if you were trying to call the Face API directly. Unfortunately, it seems they don't always put in all of the options that we might want to see. So if you recall, if you've seen the other videos, most of these connectors allow you to choose whether you want to pass an image URL or the actual file data. Now, the real Face API allows you to do that, but the wrapped up detect faces step in flow doesn't. It forces you to only put in image URL. It doesn't let you put in the image data. And there are other sort of parameters, arguments that you can pass to Face API that are not being exposed by the step here. So we're not going to use this step. I'm going to take it out. And we're unfortunately going to have to do it the more complicated way, which is to communicate directly with the Face API rather than going through this nice sort of wrapper that fills in a lot of the options for us. So the way we can do that is to choose the HTTP step. And then we get a frightening box asking us for all sorts of complicated things, most of which have no kind of drop down or guidance on how to fill them in. So I'm going to give you that guidance and show you how to do that now. So the bonus with this HTTP step is it's very flexible, and you can use any of the features that the API exposes. If you use one of the wrapped up ones in Flow, it may not have all the features that you need or that you would like to use. Okay, so we're going to be calling the Face API. Now, at this point, we need to get ourselves a a key to use the Face API. Now, don't worry, it's not going to cost you any money, and it's not going to take you more than a couple of minutes to do. I'm going to set one up here, and I'll set up a new one now and then delete it later. And then even if you see my key, you won't be able to make use of it. So this is Azure. You can sign up for Azure. I think you will need to give it a credit card, but there's no charge. No monthly charge, no standing charge. You can sign up on a pay-as-you-go basis, and don't worry, we're going to be using all free services within Azure. So you may need a credit card to sign up, but it's not going to cost you anything. So I'm in Azure. This is a completely new setup. I haven't added any resources yet, so I'm going to start adding some resources now. So I can hit create resource either here or here, it doesn't really matter. And the resource that I want to use is going to be the Face API. So I'm just going to do a search on Face. And here is the Face API. So I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to say I want to create that resource. And okay, I think I would have to sign up for this, so give me a moment. I'm going to get to the same place that I was just at, but under an account that I have already signed up for. Bear with me. Okay, so apologies there. I've just signed out and signed back in again on an account where I've got everything configured already, but I'll show you still the steps of creating that Face API resource. So although I've already got one, I'm going to go through all the steps of popping it in. So create resource, search for Face, choose the Face API, hit the create button. So I'm going to call this Face Face Demo. This is on my free trial subscription. Location, the closest one to me is Australia East. So for performance reasons, you want to choose whatever is the closest geographical region to where you are. And then what pricing tier do I want to use? So it's going to make me choose the S0 at the moment, which is interesting of it. Normally it gives me the option for the free one. Oh, but because I've already created one free one, I can't create another. Okay, so fair enough. So you'll want to choose F0, so the free one. So the free one allows you to make 20 calls per minute and 30,000 calls per month. So that's the number of images that you are analyzing. You can see here, if you need more than that, you can go to the standard rate. That allows you to do up to 10 calls per second. So you could actually be analyzing streaming video with that. And then in terms of the calls, it's going to cost you roughly $1 US, 138 New Zealand dollars per 1,000 calls, per 1,000 images that you process. Right, so what I'm going to do is I am not actually going to create this right now because it's going to make me put it in the paid one. I'll continue using my free one. Resource groups. Resource groups are just ways of tracking cost within Azure. So if you've got an app that perhaps makes use of the Face API and some SQL Server, Azure SQL DB databases and so on, then what you can do is you can put them all in the same resource group so that you can monitor the cost of those more easily than if you had to go and pick those all out individually in your bill. Okay, so that's how you go about creating the Face API. So I'm going to jump back to my dashboard, which is going to make me throw that away. So here's my Face test API. So once you've created it, then you'll be able to see it amongst your services. You can go into the overview for it, and you will be able to see an endpoint. So the endpoint is the first thing that we need to grab. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this endpoint. There's a little copy button there, and I'm going to go back into Flow. I'm going to fill in that we're going to be doing a post request. So this information, if you delve through all of the documentation, you'll find your way through it eventually, which is what I did with a bit of trial and error. And then what I need to do next is I need to specify that endpoint. I want to grab some information from here. So I'm going to be sending my image to this endpoint. Now there's a few other bits of information that I need to fill in as well. So the first piece of information is going to be what particular feature of the Face API I want to make use of. So there's different things you can do with the Face API, but what we want to do is we want to do detect. So make sure you don't make any typos when you put this in. So we're making a post type call to this endpoint, and we want it to do a detect. Now let's put some other bits of information in. So these are the bits of information that when things are wrapped up properly in Flow, it makes it easier for you to enter, but we can still put our information in here. So I'm going to be putting this in by doing a bit of copy and paste. So bear with me. So for the headers, I've got to say we're going to give you a subscription key, and I'll show you how to get that in a second. And we're also going to have to say content type. And the value for the content type is this application octet stream. So as I say, I managed to piece this together from sifting through various bits of documentation and the Swagger files. I will put it in the description of the video on YouTube so that you can just copy and paste it from there if you don't want to have to go through all of that hassle. So here, the content type, this is where we are specifying whether we want to send the actual image or send a URL that points to the image. So remember, this was not exposed to us within the Face API connector within Flow itself. Okay. Another thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set this parameter, which is to say we want certain information about the face attributes, and we're going to grab the age, the gender, the emotion, the smile, the hair, the makeup, the accessories, the occlusion, the exposure, and the noise. So all the options that are available to us. So I'm just going to copy that little list there, and I'm going to paste it in here. And finally, I'm going to say what we're going to do now is we are going to send the output of this compose step. So remember, the compose step is the one that turns our image into binary data rather than DataUri format. So I can say, look, for the body, then just give me the output from my compose step. So that is nearly everything you need. The only other thing you need is your subscription key. So I'm going to try not to show you my subscription key, just in case you start using up all of my free calls, but I'm going to talk you through it. So if we jump back into here, which is, remember, our Azure portal, and then our overview of our Face API that we've signed up for the free version of, there's a button here which says Show Access Keys. So I'm not going to click that right now, but if I were to click it, then you would see what the access key is, and you can copy the access key and you put it into your HTTP box here next to where it says key. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to just hide what's in this box, and then we're going to carry on. Okay, so I filled in my access key, and then I just closed the box up so that you can't see it. You're going to have to go and sign up for your own. Like I say, it's not going to cost you any money, and it only takes a few minutes. So just go ahead and do that. So we are now at the point where we can start sending some images through. Now, we're not sending anything back yet, because what we have to do is, when we're going to send data back, is we first of all have to specify what the format of the data is going to be, what the data is going to look like. And we don't know what it's going to look like yet because we haven't actually run this flow. So we're going to run the flow now, and then we're going to check the information that the HTTP step returns, and then we're going to use that to specify the format of the data, which is going to be returned to PowerApps. So here we are. Need to authenticate now. There we go. So then, let's just come out of there for a moment, hit the button again, hit the flows again. And of course what I haven't done is save the flow. So let's save the flow. Now I'm going to give the flow a particular naming convention. I'm going to say PA because it's triggered by PowerApps, and I will just call this face demo YT for YouTube. And I'm going to save it. And the other thing that often catches me out is sometimes they are disabled. So just make sure that it is enabled before you start trying to make use of it. Okay, so back into here again, and now we can see here we are, face demo YT. So I am going to add that for the on select of this button. So we can see this is being added, and it says complete your flow parameters. So our parameter is, remember just how we got the image for the image control out of the col photo collection. So the first row of col photo and whatever is in the URL column. There we are. So that's now going to send that to flow for us. So let's take a photo and send it. So here we are. I shall give it a smile again and hit the analysis button. So we can see the activity indicator across the top of the screen there. So something has happened. Now nothing has come back yet because we haven't configured any of that yet, but we can go back into our flow. And if we refresh here, we should be able to see our run history. So there we are. The flow succeeded. That's good. And we're going to jump in and we're going to have a little look. Here we are. So I am in the mode now where we can see what actually transpired within this flow. We're looking under the hood. We're seeing what data was sent backwards and forwards. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click into the HTTP box and have a look at what the output is. So I did that off camera just to make sure that you can't see my API key again. So I've scrolled down to the output section, and here we are in the output section. We can see what came back from our call to the face API. So we've got the face rectangle, and then we've got some face attributes. So this is where the gender and the age are, and then we're into the emotion scores. And then we get some other things back, like was it a well-exposed photograph? Was it a noisy photograph? Was it a bit speckly? Is makeup being worn? And so on. So that's the information that has come back. So what we need to do is highlight that and copy it. And then we're going to go back into edit mode. So now I'm going to add what's going to be the final step of the flow. And this is going to be the step that passes the information back into PowerApps. Now there is a specific PowerApps option, but we don't want to use that one because with that option, all we can do is send back fairly simple data types: text, yes, no, file, email, number. There's no option for sending back this complex data. So this is JSON data, JavaScript object notation data. So it's a little bit like XML, same sort of idea. But we can't send that back using this step. So we are going to have to use the generic response step instead, which lets us send back anything we like. The advantage with the PowerApps one is that you can send back several different things. With the request response step, you can only send the one thing back, although it's packaged up inside the JSON format, so it can have multiple things within it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our option use sample payload to generate schema. So we have to fill in this box. This is the box that says, okay, this is the information that we're going to send back. This is the format of the information. So if we don't fill in what the format of the information is going to be, then nothing is going to work. So I'm going to say create my format definition, my schema, based on some sample data. So I'm just going to paste in that data that I put on the clipboard and click the Done button. And here we are. This has created for me this schema, saved me typing all of that stuff out, which is good. So now I'm going to say what we want to send back. So this is the format of what we're sending back. What I want to send back is what came back in the body of the HTTP action. There we go. I'm going to save that. Now I'm going to return to the app. And what I'm going to have to do now is I am going to have to refresh the connector, because what I've done is I have changed it. I have changed the parameters that come back, and it's not dynamic. When you hit the add button to add one of the flows, then at that time the PowerApps interrogates flow and says, well, what information do you want me to send to you? What information are you going to return back to me? And if you ever go and change any of that, then it's going to break it. So you have to re-add it. Unfortunately, there's no refresh option on here. So what you've got to do is say, well, I'm going to remove it. So that's immediately giving me a little error above my analysis button, because this is no longer a valid connector. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new button. And I am going to set the action of this button to this flow. And of course, when I click on it now, because I removed it before, it's going to add it in again. So you'll see down at the bottom it says adding. So now it's interrogating it, it's having a look, it's seeing what the parameters need to be. And so it's brought that in. So that's fine. I don't need this button anymore. I can delete it. I'm just using that so I can re-establish my connection to the flow. And you'll notice that my little error on the analysis button has disappeared as well, because what's in here is now valid again. So our flow now returns some data to us. It returns that JSON data. So we're going to put that JSON data in a collection. So I'm going to say clear collect. We're going to have a collection called col face data. And it is going to be populated with whatever comes back from the flow. So let's give that a little try. So again, I'm going to smile for the camera, hit the analysis button. We get some activity indicators going on. No data is going to appear on the screen because I haven't set any of that up yet, but I can go in and I can check my collections and I can check col face data, and I can see here that it contains some information. So the information that you get back in this JSON format can be quite complex. So what I would get back is one row for each person identified in the image. And then within that, there's a face ID. There's also face rectangle, which is a record which has got the height, left, top, and width. So you know where to place the face rectangle over the image. And we've got face attributes. Within face attributes, we've got our age, our gender, and our score for our smile, but we've also got buried within that our emotions, and there's some other stuff in there as well. So there's hair, how bald are you, is your hair visible, and what color is your hair. So we can see that it's coming in. But we're going to have to interrogate this to pull out the information and put it on the screen where we want it to go. I'm going to show you how to do that now. Okay, now the first thing I am going to do is I am going to put in a gallery. So let's insert a gallery, and we're going to make it a blank vertical gallery. That's very important. And we want this to be exactly over the top of our image. So what I should do is go through and set the X, Y, and the height and the width, but to save time, I'm not going to do that right now. You've already seen how I do that with the image one earlier. And I am going to set the data source, the items property for this, to be my col face data. There we go. Fantastic. And what I'm going to do next is I am going to put in that rectangle for the face. So let's go find the rectangle. It's somewhere down near the bottom, not quite at the bottom. There it is. And of course, what I didn't do was click into the gallery properly first. So let's do that again. See if I can get it in there this way. Is that going to work? No, it's appeared outside the gallery again. Let's remember to click in there first of all, and then insert our rectangle. There we are. Now our rectangle is inside the gallery. We can see that by the way that it's sort of tabbed in there. And we're just going to very quickly do a little bit of formatting so that we have got a border color which is going to make it stand out, and a border style, and a border thickness, and then we are going to set the fill to be transparent, so not white, transparent. There we go. So now I've got my rectangle. So because this is a gallery, we're going to have a rectangle for every row of data returned, for every face that was identified in the image. So now we need to place this rectangle over the face. Now, what we have to remember to do here is to go to our image control and switch on a property called Calculate Original Dimensions, because the dimensions or the coordinates that I get back for that rectangle from the Face API are going to match whatever the original size of the image was, which may not be exactly the same as the size that I've scaled it to on here. So the Calculate Original Dimensions is going to let me do some calculations in a second, which is going to let me see how much wider or how much taller the image is, so I can place the rectangle in the correct spot. Fantastic. So let's put that together. I'm now going to go to the rectangle, probably easier to pick it up from the navigator on the left, and I'm going to go to its X property, and what we're going to do is we're going to say the X should be our gallery 1 dot selected. Oops. Apologies, it's this item because I'm already in the gallery. So this item. So for this row, remember there will be a row for every face which is in the photo. So this item dot the face rectangle dot X. Sorry, it's left. So if you remember the options that there were for face rectangle, remember putting the dot in here is your friend and shows you the valid options. So X maps to left, so there we are. So do the left, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put in a little fudge factor just in case our image is a different size, the way we're displaying it to the image that was sent to the Face API. So what we're going to do, and I always get this round the wrong way, so I'm going to check it. We are going to do the image width divided by the image original width. So there we are. So we're going to multiply it by that. So here we are. Image photo dot width divided by image photo dot original width. There we are. Now that's showing in the wrong place because, of course, when I went in here and told you to always set this to true, I told you I didn't actually do it. So now I'll make it true, because unless you set this to true, then the original width is always 0. So there we are. Now that's set to true. Now the box is going to go to the right place. Excellent. So let's go back to our rectangle, just get our rectangle in the right place. So that was our X property. Let's do our width next. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to do the width, because I can copy paste most of this. All I've got to do here is change this for width. And we're going to copy that, and now we're going to set the Y property. So now I've got to change this from width to this is the Y property, so top. There we are, and this needs to be height, and this needs to be original height, because we're now working in the other plane. So there's our Y, and now we're going to do our height property. And of course, we've got to change that to be dot height. There we go. So we've got a box around the face. And remember, if there were multiple faces in here, then each face would be highlighted as well. So the other thing that I need to remember to do is in my gallery, because I've only got one photo here, but the other steps you need to do is to make sure that your template size is set to 0 and that your template padding is set to 0 as well. Okay, otherwise each of the boxes for each of the subsequent faces ends up being offset by the template size and the template padding, and you find that each box is just slightly out for each other face. So set those to 0, and then the boxes should appear properly over the faces. So that's all good. The other thing that we could do as well is set the color, so that we say if this is the selected item, then set the color to green or set the color to red. I think I've got a little example. Yeah, so there we are. So if you've got multiple faces, then you can set it up so that when you click in the one box, it turns green and you get the information from that box. And then you can click in the other box and you get the information for that person. So, cool. We can now get our box around the face. All we need to do now is to interrogate our data and to display it on the screen. So let us do that next. So what should we start with then? Let's start with the age and the gender. So it's a good idea to pop into the collection and just sort of try and remember your way through the data set. Another little trick which can be quite useful as well, I'll do it now, is to use a data table as well. That can also help you to navigate your way through the data set. So what I'm going to do as the source for this data table is I am going to set it to gallery1.selected. So there we can now see what is at the level of gallery 1 selected. So my face attributes, I think that's where it is. We can probably go in there. That's it. And then under the face attributes, we've got, oh, sorry, in the wrong place, selected. We can then dive down there into the face attributes. There we are. And then we can see what's under there, and we can see that we've got age there as well. Unfortunately, this doesn't show you whether the item age, for example, is a table or a record or an actual value. So you just have to do a little bit of experimenting, but this can be quite a neat way, having a little data table tucked to one side in your app so that you can just go through interrogating your data until you work out what is the proper path to your data. So anyway, I think mine is going to be this and then .age on the end. So I'm just going to copy that for a moment. And I'm going to insert a label somewhere. Let's pop it over here. And so I'm going to set the text property to be that .age. There we go, 42. Excellent. I wish I was only 42. Let's just move that data table out of the way a bit more. So there we've got that, and what we could easily do here is we could say, okay, what we want is to have age : and then use the ampersand to concatenate. So there we are, age is 42. So let's do one more of those. So let's drag that in, age is 42. Let's just check the gender. There we are, and change this to gender. Fantastic, so there we are, age 42, gender male. And then let's have a little look at how angry or how happy I am. So for that, we're going to have to navigate a little bit lower through here. So I'm going to use our little trick here again. So we've got gallery 1, dot selected, dot face attributes, and then under here I can see that we're going to want to go for emotion next. So let's go into emotion. There we are, and then under emotion here, here's where we've got our anger, contempt, disgust, and so on. So let's pick up that, and I'll insert another label, drop it down here, and let's pop in that. And what shall we have? Shall we have the happiness? There we are, so I'm getting a score of 1. Remember, it's out of 1, so that's pretty good going. I'm as happy as I can be. And again, if we wanted to, we could say happiness. Oops. Put my quotes in because it's text. And concatenate that on the end. So you can see that would be easy enough to just carry on with that. So we've got the happiness. We can also put in the, if I can type, we can put in the contempt. There we are, no contempt at all, and remember to change the heading here. So I'm not going to put those all in now. You can see how you can put that together. If you want the thing to be showing as a percentage rather than just out of 1, then of course what you can do is you could do something like, say, give me the text of this multiplied by 100 and as a percent format. So there we are, happiness is 100%. So easy enough just to change your data there by using text and a little multiplier. So that's great. I think that was pretty much everything we did. Oh, we did some stuff with the hair as well, didn't we? So let's come back to here for a second and let's see how we can navigate our way to hair. Pop that up again as well. So we'll see that pops up, and then we're going to go down to hair. There we are. So if we want to say how bald we are, then we can just select that one. Let's very quickly do that. I don't think I'm going to like the answer, but I'm going to do it just to demonstrate. So insert label. Dot bold, and that's going to give me a value, because remember when we were looking through our collections, face attributes, hair, there, that's a single value. Hair color we'll do next. Hair color is coming out as a table, so we can't put a table into a label control, so we'll actually populate this data table we've already got with the hair colors. So dot hair, and then we're going to go dot hair color, and then we can choose the columns that we want to show. We'll have the color and the confidence, and there we go. So that information has been populated. So it's quite handy to use. I think it's quite handy to use the data table when you're trying to navigate your way through the data. Unfortunately, the data table doesn't tell you whether the items within it are other tables or records or individual values, which you could display in a label. You'll have to sort of jump backwards and forwards between your data table and your collection view to try and figure out your navigation around all of these values. But it's very useful, I've found, to understand how this works. So we've done it with these cognitive services controls. I was recently having to do some work with the Google translation API because we needed a language which wasn't covered by the Microsoft translator. And so it was very useful to have messed around with these sorts of little examples and to get the hang of both building the flows with these HTTP type requests, because the Google services aren't incorporated in Flow, so you can't just choose them from the list of connectors. It's one of the ones where you've got to put in the HTTP details, and then also for manipulating the data that comes back so that you can navigate through that complex JSON data structure and drill your way down to the data that you want to display. Okay, well, thanks very much. I think I've gone a little bit over the 45 minutes that I had suggested it was going to take, so I hope you've stayed with me there. Like I say, I will drop some things into the description of the video so that you don't have to go and hunt through the documentation like I did to find them. Do just be careful when you're copy pasting to make sure that you get it exactly the same, no additional spaces, make sure your quotes come out correctly and all that sort of thing. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed that session. So have a little go at making that app for yourselves, and you can just play around with your facial expressions to try to see whether you are an Oscar-winning actor or not, whether you can show your fear, contempt, disgust, and so on. Let's just see what it's going to come back with. Fear, 99%. Yes, that Oscar is going to be mine. So you can put one of these together and have a little play around with your friends. It's just a little bit of fun. But in addition to being a little bit of fun, you're going to learn a whole load of really useful skills, how you can get Power Apps working with Flow, how you can get Flow working with external APIs through that HTTP call, how you can send complex data back into Power Apps, and how you can then navigate through that data and display it on the screen in the fashion which you want. Cool, okay, so final thing then, please remember to hit the subscribe button. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, then drop them in the comments. I do try to keep up with the comments. I'm not always 100% with that, but I shall try to answer you as soon as I can. And yeah, if you've got ideas for other things that you would like to see, or if there are parts of this video which you didn't quite understand and you want me to go into more depth, then yeah, just let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can sort out. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and goodbye and happy power apping.